Chunaima, Dunke Uye, Krista Reid, Uchanke Uye, Zakokare Inje, Agunda Inje. My name is Chunaima in my traditional language, and in Guchenwe, the colonial way, Krista Reid, and I live in Dakotado, Kings Junction, Yukon, on the traditional territory of the Champagne-Unicaq First Nations. And I'm here with Melanie Bennett today, and we're from the Yukon First Nation Education Directorate. I'm the Director of Indigenous Education and Advocacy.
Okay. Drin Tatlap Tohozo, Shojre Deniju Chigger, Shojre Melanie Bennett, Chondikachin DJ, Dawson City DJ, Jur DJ, Wetcha Alice Titus, Withu Alfred Titus, Yukon First Nations Education Directorate, Ra Treda Hokai, Executive Director, Nihe Dashe Shotrin Lai. I said my name is Chigger, and my First Nations name is Chigger. My Indigenous name, or my English name as I would call it, is Melanie Bennett. I'm from Dawson City, I'm Trondikachin, and I am from the Wolf Clan. My grandmother is Alice Titus. We are matriarchal, so we follow our grandmother's line, and my grandfather is Alfred Titus. I'm from the Wolf Clan, and I get the pleasure of being the Executive Director to the Yukon First Nations Education Directorate. And I really want to thank AFN for allowing us to come here and talk. I think that the room kind of matches us. We're small and mighty little territory, and it's one conversation at a time that I think is going to change our language story in the Yukon. Yep. My First Nation, I just kind of, when in my first workshop, I was in the yellow group. It was very interesting to be in there because one of the ladies said that she was worried that they only had 60 speakers left. And I very humbly said, you know, we wish for that, because in my First Nation, we have one fluent speaker left, and he is 95 years old. So we are working very hard. We have done a lot of preservation by documenting our language, but now it's about transitioning our language to our children. So, yeah. Are you going to be the clicker, or am I the clicker?
Whichever. One thing I wanted to say,
What
though,
do I
is that I am so humbled to be on the territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Yes. I have never really traveled this way before, and except for one time, and I was in Eel River First Nation just in April, and the hospitality and the care that I've received there was amazing, and I'm just so grateful. And I was there for a full moon ceremony in April, and here I am again on Mi'kmaq territory in full moon. So I was like, I'm in ceremony again. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just so grateful for the ancestors that have taken such good care of us and kept us safe in our travels, no delays, no anything. So everything that we've done since we've made this journey has been just impeccable, and I'm so grateful. And we're clicking.
You can talk to this and I'll answer our elder right now.
Oh, okay. Double duties.
I know.
So one of the things that we talk about with our languages is that how it connects us to the land and the spirits around us. And there's so many different things that we have in the language that, you know, people always say, can you translate? You'll get these all the time. You know, can you translate this into English for us? And it's like, well, actually, no, we can't. Like, it's a feeling, it's an idea, it's a concept. The language holds our worldviews and our spirituality, and that's not something that can be translated to English. And so when we've lost our language, we're starting to lose those little pieces. And I think some of the elders just in the session that we were in spoke to that. And so when we talk about our elders and their proficiency in the language, and how they're passing it down. You know, we still have language speakers in the Yukon, in the territory I live in is Southern Shoshone, and we're very lucky to have the elders that we have and the speakers that we have, but there are few of them. We only have a small handful of high speakers, and there's even elders that we have that are really proficient speakers that are still turning to the older elders. And in just during COVID, the last few years, we lost so many of our high speakers. And so we are literally in absolute crisis to retain our language.
No, you do yours, I'll do mine. Whoops, wrong way. We're learning.
So this is you.
This is just a little bit of a background of our organization and what the Yukon First Nations Education Directorate does, because we're a new organization. And I said I have the pleasure of doing it. I am a born and bred Yukoner and have been in education for 30 plus years. My grandmother determined when I was 4 that I would be an educator. That's how we do it in our Trondagachin way. We are identified as children on what our strengths are and where we will go, and mine was education. And so I'm ending my career doing the most amazing thing to me, which is I get to work with our children. To me, they are our greatest resource. And every day we operate a wraparound service model for our children that is funded through Jordan's Principle. But the main component of that is the cultural aspect of it. And our culture is our language. Our language is our culture. So we try to think of everything that we do. In the establishment of our organization, one of our really well-known, and I call him seasoned, chiefs, who has been a chief for a very long time, actually stood up in one of our visioning sessions and said, you know, we don't understand language. We don't understand how it is to work to educate in that, because we've all gone through residential school. And he said, we don't understand our way. We are reclaiming that right now. And that part of that process is learning our language and learning our way, as he calls it, because it can't be just divided up as in our language, our culture. It is our way and how we do it. And there are a multitude of things that that encompasses. But our ability in our little organization has been to enact that we can do that in all the services that we provide to the Indigenous students in the territory through our wraparound service model. This is you.
So just to give you a little bit of background, yes, I stole this from your website. So this is probably the easiest way to see the traditional territories of in the Yukon. So we have 14 different First Nations. 11 of them are self-governing First Nations, and we have 8 different languages in the Yukon, and 7 of them are in the Athabaskan family, and the other one is Tlingit. Which part?
Never mind, I'm just teasing. You gotta have fun.
Tagish. Tagish. Tagish is Athabaskan?
No, Tagish Guan. Tagish Guan.
Oh, where's Wayne?
Yeah. It's me who has to push the button. You guys are gonna have to be like super patient with us. I will say, I'm also coming to you today on probably one of the most significant days for us in the territory, where we have just gone through a long process of establishing a First Nations school board agreement, and I have been key to that work. But I am also extremely passionate about language as a learner myself. And last night was our elections for our first board of trustees. And so we have 5 Indigenous people in the territory who have stepped forward and been elected into the trustees for our new First Nations school board. So hence why my phone is popping off right now, and I'm trying to keep
trying
the
to
time
focus.
change. And
Yeah.
last night with a very late night, I think both Krista and I are like, okay, our goal today is just to keep our eyes open and a smile on our face. So let's have fun, okay?
So one of the things I wanted to point out, the language that I'm most familiar with in the territory is Southern Shoshone. And as I said, they're all Athabascan languages. So they do have relationship to each other. Not everyone can understand each other, but some of the words are very similar, and you can have a discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's really interesting. And then we talked about different dialects a little bit in the other room there. And within the Southern Shoshone territory, there's several different dialects. So, but they're all so very closely related.
Mm-hmm.
And then those dialects are very closely related to Northern Shoshone and actually Tagish.
Yeah.
Lots of and Casa, Gwich'in. I don't know much Hondo
And then
at all.
Gwich'in, Han, and Upper Tanana, in before, there were no borders. And so my First Nation here, where the Han speaking are, actually went way up into Alaska. And Upper Tanana, and then the Gwich'in. There are a number of dialects with the Gwich'in that I'm Tronda Gwich'in, there's Vunda Gwich'in, there's Tetlin Gwich'in. And my husband knows you ain't heard any bitchin' till you married a Gwich'in. Right?
And within the Southern Shoshone, there's the Ta'an dialect, which is like the barge. There is a Champagne dialect, the Klukshu dialect. I'm missing Ajax dialect,
Ajax.
which is very close to the Northern Shoshone. And so, like for instance, when I say Danche, that's more of the Klukshu dialect, which also has a lot of Tlingit intermarried into it too, just because of its geographics to the coast and the relationships that happen there. And like Danche is the Ta'an dialect, so it's similar, but there's just a little bit of differences. So I'm going to talk a little bit of politics now, a little bit of history of politics. So under the...
Just tell me when you want to hit the link.
Oh yeah. Well, I stole this off the website too. Forward for visual. There's Yukon Native Language Center employees in here, which is why I'm disclaimer. So under the umbrella final agreements that were settled with Yukon First Nations in, I think, 1993. And from those agreements, the Yukon Native Language Center was established. And at the time, their mandate was to document and preserve and collect a lot of recordings, books, resources. And there were, in that time, many speakers of almost all the different languages. And there was also a mandate to have language in the schools, in the public school system. So one of the big mandates of YNLC at the time was to teach speakers to be teachers and do a lot of this documentation. In 2019, I believe, YNLC was under the, it was under the Yukon government in the tripart agreements with the umbrella agreement, and then it was transferred solely over to the Council of Yukon First Nations and is solely run and overseen by the Council of Yukon First Nations. And the mandate kind of changed now. So now what we are doing, what they are doing, they are supporting Yukon First Nation communities in developing resources, getting language out in the community, building capacity in the communities. They have a really amazing youth mentorship program happening right now. They also work with the Simon Fraser University with Marianne Ignace. They hold a language conference, which when the communities that are language warriors that are coming into the community, coming from the communities, they get to hang out, see each other, and receive a lot of good support from there.
Did you want me to click on this one?
Do you want to?
Totally up to you. I don't even know if this
I don't know
computer's...
if it will hyperlink, actually.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
We didn't try
Oh, it did.
So,
It did. But I have no idea what Firefox is. Or... Oh, there it is.
So the communities are really grateful for the Yukon Native Language Center for their support in building capacity and helping with establishing language programs and training opportunities and some of the documentation that YNLC has collected over the years. What we had just done through COVID too. They have this huge database of recordings and videos that they've collected over the years. And one of the things that happened was they sent the list out to us, this giant list of all this different documentation that has our language recordings on it. And so our language and culture department with Champagne and Asia language and culture department and heritage departments went through and prioritized all the different things that we felt we would like copies of. And so we're still working on that. I know they've just hired an archivist to start organizing to make all that documentation accessible to the community. Yay!
And when Krista says communities, I think we should have backed up a little bit and just clarified that in Yukon we have 8 language groups. There are 14 First Nations. And of those 14 First Nations, 11 of them are self-governing. So they have very different dynamics where they actually do receive what I call pennies within their FTA dollars for language, but it is literally pennies. And the Language Center, the First Nations just recently took it back. It was the Yukon Territory has a very different dynamic. When other regions, after residential schools, were being given back jurisdiction of education, and the federal government was negotiating with them to have their own jurisdiction of education, the territories, the federal government unilaterally decided to hand it to the territorial government. And that included a lot of the funding model monies that was going towards language. The Language Center came out of that, but it was a colonial organization trying to run a language center where teachers were being implemented in colonial schools, and it wasn't working. It's been there for 30 years, yet they have produced no fluent speakers. And the First Nations have been at the table saying, this is wrong, you guys cannot do this. And just recently, in the last, I think they're in year 4 now, or 5, I think we're almost in year 5, that the First Nation, under the organization of the Council of Yukon First Nations, have taken back the YNLC, and they have given it a different direction. And their direction right now is, there has been extensive amounts of work on preservation that Krista just talked about, but they are working on developing fluency. And so it is a very different model. And I know our YNLC employees here can speak to that, right, Nansana, of how that fluency model looks very different. There is no focus right now on getting speakers to go and teach in colonial schools. It's building fluency and working with the First Nations. And so I think some of the discussion that Krista will bring forth about her region of, with Champagne-Ajiac, the region that she's been working on, we see great success. But this particular group I wanted to acknowledge, this is Kaska. Kaska is one of the languages spoken, and these are the Kaska youth language trainees. They were there in a youth summer language training program. And our organization, YFNED, supported in helping to get that program running and working with the Kaska. There's 4 Kaska nations. 2 of them are in the Yukon and 2 of them are outside of the Yukon in BC, and bringing them together so that they can revitalize and really focus on having fluency for their speakers, and how they can change that. So these 6 young youth had their first kind of summer on the land language program that they were catapulted into. you're just gonna learn how to speak the language. No one spoke to them in English, no one did any of those colonial activities. There was some tears at the beginning, but this is at the end after they're all cleaned up and had a shower, and you could see the smiles on their faces. They were very, very successful, and we're looking at doing a larger model of that now and continuing on. It's one of our small, and that's why I say we're small and mighty. We have to just keep moving forward with initiatives such as that. And now you get to talk about Margaret.
Okay, so this is, I really wanted to acknowledge this elder, Margaret Workman. She has been working with the Native Language Center for years and years and years. So if you go on to YNLC, you'll see a lot of the recordings are with Margaret. Some of the videos, you'll see amazing recordings of Polly Fraser and Margaret, several, and she has been one of the main champions in lobbying for First Nations languages in the school system. So she has just done so much work, as you can see, for years and years and years. And I can't read my notes, they're really small.
Put your glasses on.
But if I look up, I'm like... so her lobbying and contributions to Yukon languages in the Yukon public schools have been amazing. Yet we still see the disparities within the schools. There's still only 20 minutes, maybe half an hour a day, once or twice a week in the schools, and we're still having a lot of difficulties filling those teacher roles within the public school system. So, and one of the things that we did see is that the speakers and elders like Margaret Workman have retired, and there's these huge holes that are left, and that's why we're so grateful to a lot of the community projects that are happening with language revitalization, are creating speakers so that we can have these champions coming into the communities and working within their own communities so that the language is being transferred and passed on.
And the little pictures.
And this is, I don't even remember what that was for.
AJAC, getting back to
Oh,
AJAC.
the AJAC relicensing.
Mm-hmm.
So Margaret's been extremely vocal in negotiations with the Yukon relicensing for Yukon Electric and ATCO Electric. And so there is a dam that is built on the Champagne-Ajac traditional territory. And she's been extremely vocal in the restoration of the area as well. And
Because
so,
it impacted their life.
and how it's impacted. Yes.
Because their life is that.
And-
Here's my favorite pot.
Oh. Okay. Oh, see, you flipped it already. I keep forgetting that you're ahead of me.
I'm not ahead of you. I'm the one who's doing that.
Right, exactly. So one of the programs that I'm most familiar with is the Champagne-Ajac Adult Language Immersion Program. So we have had extreme support from the First Nation, as well as the elders. So the program started inception was, I think the first cohort started in September of 2018. Look, I have to think about that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was meant to be a 2-year program, but COVID kind of got in the way, and there was a lot of face-to-face language lost. And so those students had requested to have an extra year. So it became a 3-year cohort, and they graduated 8 students. In the meantime, the first year, it was all through Champagne-Ajac. So there, Marianne Ignace came and supported us, and it's now an accredited program through Simon Fraser University.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Can we show the little video now?
yes.
Okay. We'll show the little video. And I just want to clarify, when Krista says the First Nation did extensive support towards it, this First Nation in particular said we cannot rely on other models and started to move forward. And because it's our language. And so they invested $1 million at the get-go and said, we're going to make this successful and be done in our way. It's providing a model as an adult language immersion program and focus on that we need to build fluent speakers. And it's proving to be extremely successful. But this young speaker here is the key to it all, because an elder who we just recently lost was his model, his mentor, his best friend.
Grandpa. So what Melanie is explaining, so Shepton and Najak went to a special General Assembly. They took it to the community, and they had almost 100% support from the community to take their own funding through their trust program and invest it into the language.
Oh. I hope this plays.
It's going to play.
Are you guys connected to
Can you hear it?
Oh.
There's few cars in Haines Junction, but as the man behind these traffic reports will tell you, every word is a word worth speaking. Kashaw is from Champaign and Ajax First Nation and makes road reports in his ancestral language of Southern Shoshone. It's a humorous and informative way to preserve a language that's rapidly vanishing. He says the inspiration came from a comedic source.
Time for the weather report.
Buster here. One of the clouds up there looks like a horse.
I was inspired by smoke signals. Chief Leonard George on smoke signals, he does a road report, and it's hilarious.
Kashaw makes the videos as part of an effort to help preserve Southern Shoshone. Right now, there's fewer than 20 speakers in the community. It's why Kashaw has made it his mission to pass on the language so that it may be preserved for future generations.
So my vision is very clear on what I'm doing. It's paramount for survival and for the survival of our people.
Kashaw grew up as Stephen Reid. No one in his family besides his grandmother spoke Southern Shoshone. It wasn't until university that he truly realized how few people spoke their traditional language.
And that summer I went home and I looked at the community and I was wondering, where are the younger speakers?
Since then, Kashaw has earned a degree in education and a master's in language revitalization, and has been teaching himself and others a language on the brink of extinction. Now 41 years old and going by his traditional name, Kashaw describes himself as moderately proficient, and for the last 3 years has been teaching a one-of-its-kind immersive language program to a group of 8 students. He says it's those who want to see their tradition carried on that's compelled him to do the work.
Started with a vision. So just like my mind tells my hand what to do, the ancestors tell me what to do. I'm the working hand of the ancestors.
Something there. Okay.
The full-day classes heavily focus on speaking. Eventually, some students will even pass on the language to children at a local daycare. Kashaw says the results are promising.
Our younger students are hungry for the language. It's redirected their lives. A lot of the things that is being transmitted to the students is the teachings.
Sheila Kushnaruk is one of the oldest students and works at the First Nations Cultural Center. She's learning the language to enhance her interpretive work, but there's also another reason.
When I was growing up, I didn't have the chance, and now I can understand what Grandma was teaching us.
The First Nations invested $1 million into the program so students like Kushnaruk can attend classes without worrying about finances. Now she plans on passing on what she's learned to the next generation, something she never thought she'd be able to do.
And that way there, when I'm talking to my grandkids, I can understand what they're asking me, the questions.
Today, elders Lorraine Allen and Audrey Brown are showing students how to make gopher sticks. A few days a week, the elders attend class and reinforce the language by teaching cultural practices like these that most students haven't had the opportunity to learn. They say they can still remember a time when only Indigenous languages were spoken.
I never forget my language. As my mom speaks Southern Shoshone, and my dad speaks Northern Shoshone, so I speak both of them.
Their dream is that the language will be passed on through these teachings.
We're happy that the students their progress is quicker than we thought.
While the program was only intended to run for 2 years, students requested a third to better hone in on the language. Next year, they'll graduate and a new group will come in. The class is so popular, there's now a wait list for prospective students.
And what I'm really trying to foster is that this is lifelong. It has to be. Even 3 years isn't enough time.
And it won't be an easy road ahead. As more elders pass on every year, the language goes with them.
It's challenging that our numbers are so low. It's challenging that our community is so small. But there's a lot more things that are pushing me down that path, and there are challenges.
And while immersive programs like these are important, Kasha says Indigenous languages can't only exist in the classroom. They need to be part of everyday speaking, like his traffic reports. But Kasha says if First Nations invest in preserving their languages, there is hope for the next generation.
My ultimate goal would be that my grandchildren never have to learn Southern Shoshone, that they just become speakers of it. It doesn't have to be something they have to dedicate their life to like I've had to. It's just something that they can have.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Hangs Junction.
Can I add something right quick?
Yep.
Or can I-
Ask a question, make a comment, you betcha.
I really, because in Nova Scotia, like, it's different. Like, I understand with like, New Brunswick, Quebec, like, everywhere, there's multiple different, First Nations there. There's multiple languages spoken. In Nova Scotia, it's Mi'kmaq.
Yep.
There's one language for all of Nova Scotia. That's why when you come here, it's like it's the land of the Mi'kmaq. So, anyways, I work with Mi'kmaq Ginamajoy. It's an organization within education. We work with almost all, 12 out of 13 First Nations in Nova Scotia, and we're in the process of creating something. We want adult immersion in our schools. I mean, like in our communities, but it's difficult because it's one language for 12 communities that are all around Nova Scotia. So how do you accommodate something so big? Like it'd be maybe I don't know how it is for multiple languages per province or territory, but I know, like, just thinking of how do we make sure that it's accessible for everybody in Nova Scotia, if, like, it'll be like an octopus, right? And we also have, like, limited speakers. A lot of our speakers are from the Cape Breton area. So we have, like, they say it like this is the mainland, and there's the South Shore, and there's the valley. And the more you go up near Yarmouth, there's minimal speakers. So we have, like, maybe a couple thousand in Cape Breton, while we have not even 100 or 50 around here.
I was gonna say 4.
Yeah, 4. Basically, yeah, that's what it is. So the more need is up here, while all the speakers are down there. Like, and I can speak for myself when I say yeah, I would be beneficial, and I could probably land a job if I were to go up somewhere like in the valley, but I refuse to leave my home. Like, I have my home, my family, my children, my grandson. I have everything that I need at home while other communities are struggling. So to see him, he reminds me of jazz. He is our Jasmine Johnson here in Nova Scotia.
I would 100% agree with you. And the monumental task that you talk about, like how do you do it? We have 8 language groups, and that has been the one thing that has worked against us the entire time. Is one, there was never any substantial funding put behind it. And what was put behind there was so minimal, it just divided and made it small. But you have to look at right now we're at a point that we have to look at the opportunities. We literally, the First Nations have got to the point that we can't keep talking about just the challenges. We have to find what the opportunities of change, and that's what Kashaw did. He said, there's nobody my age that's speaking the language. And so I have to change that. There's a few.
And yeah,
And how he did it, though, was looking at it from the perspective that the model that was in Yukon before was, let's put it in the school system. And 30 minutes a day, and they're going to come out at the end, and they'll want to speak language. Or they were thinking they were going to build fluent speakers, which was wrong. 30 minutes a day, you have to have that programming focused on inspiring them to want to take their language.
And how do you become fluent when you learn 1, 2, 3, 4, cat, dog, red, blue, yellow? Like,
So
it's
we'll talk about,
conversation, right?
yeah.
There's and we're in the beginning stages. So now within like my operational plan, where I work at MK, one of my operational plan is the creation or like the co-creation of the adult immersion. I am far from an expert on whatever, but I have minimal funding. Like $1 million is something I wish I would get, and probably maybe I would get somewhere. Like now we're in the beginning stages. So we work with Listigouche, which is a First Nation just outside of Quebec, which is another Mi'kmaq community. But then they're lucky; Quebec only has I think 2 Mi'kmaq communities, Mariah and Listigouche. So with Listigouche, it's only Listigouche people that go to that adult immersion. So we're currently working with them and to see, okay, this is level 1. Level 1 is done within a year, level 2 and level 3. So they have 3 levels. So we're trying to work with them to see, okay, what works, what doesn't. Something that works there might not work for us because it's bigger. So we're in the planning stages and very early, and I'm so excited. Hopefully in the next couple of years I could reflect back on this program. So we're like, do we put it through NSCC, which is like a community college that has NSCC every angle of whatever? Then we run into, okay, who will teach it? Do we want it virtually? But we need it every day. Do we have it? Like so many questions and so many like difficulties of how we can approach it because of where we live. So anyways, I
know that one of the models that this was based off of, I know we're on a trip with them, is that they went to Mohawk Territory, where there's
an adult immersion.
Yeah, so Brian Miracle runs an adult immersion in Oshwegan and Kanesatagi. Where's Ganawagi? Like, where did you go? And so they were really instrumental in helping us not have to reinvent the wheel. So we actually relied. They were great. They held our hand.
Do they have like a
framework?
Well, yeah, the framework. Do
Yeah.
they have that?
Yeah.
And is it accessible, or do you have to request it?
You'd have to talk with them. That would be,
Yeah,
I wouldn't
so,
want to,
Yeah, we built a really
It's-
good relationship, like our
with the
Well,
Mohawk.
just tell them I'm
sister
your friend.
program.
We're good at that.
And then one of the other things too, so I'll just let you know that a few of the graduates from this program, one of them does work in Yukon Native Language Center with these ladies here, and really helps out with the youth mentorship program that they're running right now. And
One of the
Here-
things they do.
These here,
I'll pull
and the other
them up.
thing too is that Kasha has also developed a YouTube page. And so, and a lot of our language warriors in the Yukon have access to this, and they're able to upload the road reports, as you saw. There's another young...
And do Tom the Talking Cat, which is quite fun,
And
right?
then
That's
we
the
also
youth.
have,
That's the youth connecting that, right?
Luke Campbell,
Luke
who's
Campbell.
also from Champaignesia First Nations, and he is a huge language warrior as well. And he works with Champaignesia as the community language coordinator. So building resources, documentation. He does a lot of elder interviews as well in his professional development. And so a lot of the people that work with language in our community actually do upload right to this YouTube site. And Kasha also created a website.
I'll go back and pull it up.
It's okay. He's also created a website. It was actually part of his master's dissertation, was to create this website. However, it's being rebuilt again. Just his credit card expired, and you know when you have to update your credit card information for payment on the domain, and so it was a big kerfuffle. But it's back up there now, and he's repopulating it.
How many dialects does that community have?
There's about, well, in the Southern Shoshone, there's about 5 different
5.
dialects.
Yeah.
Did I say 5?
Yeah.
Because this morning when Dion was telling the story about being in Brooklyn, and they were scared of how he was talking, it's because the Eskasoni dialect is very guttural, very in your throat, and they all sound fun and angry. Giselle can tell you, that's Giselle over there, she could tell you, I am happy, and she said, wake up, eh? And like, and that's my father's side, but my mother's side is from Elsipogtog, which is in New Brunswick, and when they speak Mi'kmaq, they sound like they're singing. You know? And then you got people from Sabaganagati in the middle, who don't know
Or do
which
you want
is
to go?
and
this
so
one?
it's really, really hard with the dialects, even in our own province. There was a study, there was a guy, and his name is, he's from here, you know, Bernie Francis. He lived in Eskasoni, and he said he was going to do a study because he noticed his babysitter talk differently. So he said, I started to do the study myself because I wanted to know what type of dialect was in Eskasoni. But because Eskasoni was during centralization, people were removed from their communities and taken to Eskasoni. There's about 8 different dialects in Eskasoni. So you'll notice even people in Eskasoni talk different. Like us compared to like Blodges, us compared to the Pullets, like us, it's... Okay, I'm gonna shut up.
We're going to skip forward just a little bit.
Because we're looking at time.
Yeah, because it's 2:57.
Yeah. Okay, go.
So you can see that in the video that you shared that they were using their hands to support, right? And so language is not just a spoken language, but also signed as well. So I think it's important that we understand that those both ways, both languages are sisters and that they go together. Right? So, and then having, like we found in Oneida that, you know, to support children's, or support anybody's learning, when you give them the signs, it helps, it really does help develop their ability to speak the language, right? It's also helps with their memory. So, I'm just wondering if you have Indigenous staff up there?
Yes.
And if they're a part of these programs?
And
So I think,
yes.
you know, I just wanted to really bring home the how you can partner and work with your Indigenous staff. So you can have a speaker and a signer working together.
We, I actually just spoke in the last session that I was in about the fact that a lot of the challenges we have with our way is that it is in the colonial model wanting, and even in some of our models that are being developed with frameworks, that they want the written and they want the spoken. And they forget about the unspoken language. And I was with Davin from MFNERC yesterday, and he said, you know, it's so good I don't have a mask anymore and everyone can see where I'm pointing. And it sounds, we make fun of it, but that body language that we all use, I have 6 children, 3 were born from me and 3 were from my current husband, who I've been blessed to be married twice, but never divorced. So they know I'm not I was widowed. I'm not one of those people who has like multiple husbands, okay? My children, when I speak to them and say, you know, they'll ask me for something and I'll say, it's over there. And they will know where to go and get it. But his children, if I say to them, you know, they ask for something, I have to give them explicit instructions because it's in us. It's in all of us inherently. And I teach that to our children now. Even if you just learn a few words of our language, it starts a fire in you that it will burn and bring you back to who you are. So just a few. Learn how to say thank you. Learn how to say hello. Learn how to do a prayer. We try to teach that to our kids now because it will do that. And we have to understand that it's the same with the unspoken language. My children know when I turn my head a certain way, whether or not I'm really good with that and I'm happy, or if I'm really pissed off at them. But my husband's kids don't understand how to read that at all. And that is a very important piece of our language. It's subtle. And teachers don't understand it. They don't understand when we turn our heads down, we're actually giving respect. They think that we're doing that in shame, and we're not. They don't understand that when they say, look at me, you're asking me to challenge you. And I'm not supposed to do that. I've been taught not to do that. Quickly, 2 things.
The other young man that works closely with YFNED is actually Campbell. He actually uses a total physical response method that's been really successful. And he's a great teacher as well. So we just wanted to talk about a few of the other language initiatives and programs in Yukon really quickly. So YFNED actually had passed their Language Act. So I think it was the first in Canada in 2014, and then it was adopted and accepted by Annual General Assembly in 2015. The Tasman Tlingit Council as well had passed their Languages Act just in 2017, I believe. You heard from Dwayne Acoyne this morning, and that's the First Nation and Governance Council that he sits on in Yeti. So another really amazing program that we have in the Yukon and Whitehorse is with the Pawnee First Nation and the Krista Learning Center, where they do run the Aboriginal Head Start program, and they have a language nest. They do call it a language nest. Do they call it a language nest?
Not anymore.
And Lorraine Allen, I guess we kind of stole her from there.
Because it's the same challenge. It's the same challenge of having speakers.
Yeah.
So I think some of the things that we wanted to bring in this was to just show that we're, because of the critical state that the languages are in Yukon, what the First Nations are doing to really push and bookend, because it isn't going to be one thing. There is not one key. That would be one thing I would say. It isn't going to be one activity. It is going to be everybody, all hands on deck. You have to come up and we have to hit it in every way that we can. So the YNLC is doing work in developing fluency and having that Youth Indigenous Language Trainee Program. My role in that is I work really hard to get funding for them. I'll go and write a proposal to anyone to get any dollars. I don't care how much it is, to make sure that they can operate and have those young Indigenous, I call them the YITLITs because we acronym everything in the Yukon. Those youth Indigenous language trainees. And then our First Nations have Aboriginal Head Starts that they're trying to do language nests in. And then our First Nations are doing the adult immersion program, and we are trying to change getting language in every way. And then most recently, it would be the, which way do I go? Oh, no, it's this thing. Our school board agreement. We have the opportunity now with 8 schools that are operating under a different mandate to change the way that we deliver the language. Instead of it being where it's 30 minutes a day, we will have language coordinators at language and cultural, land-based language and cultural coordinators that are going to be implemented into those schools, that they don't just go to a class and say you're learning language now. They're there to implement it with everybody, the educators, the students, the people that come into that school, so that they're participating with the children on a daily basis and talking every day with them, whatever they're doing. If they're on the playground playing, they're able to say to them, you're going down the slide, then they give them the words that it is in a language, depending on what region it is in that language. It's going to be those everyday pieces where we keep hitting it as hard as we can until I can say that, or my children will say, you know, those ancestors fought for us, and I can speak my language like Kashaw says. His grandchildren, they don't have to go to a language class. They will just know it then, so. And I actually really wanted to end on this one with us because it's something in that colonial model that we've always seen and heard, and I want to recognize that it isn't a gap in our students' ability. It's a gap in the system to meet that ability. And when you change the system, when you change how it operates, and that includes for our languages and how we do it, so that one model of not having a 30-minute-a-day lesson and taking it to an immersion where, to me, Kashaw's background of watching smoke signals, I asked some younger youth, do you know what smoke signals is? And they look at you and they're like, huh? Like, no, I don't know it. You've never seen smoke signals? Some of them haven't now. So, but his sense of humor of being able to do that and bring that to them, that's a connection that he had. And there are people now who are, you know, it's like when they go viral, they're going, hey, when are you going to post the next road report? He hasn't posted one for a while, so they're all like, hey,
I did ask
the roads are really bad. Are you going to post the road report? It's things like that where you make those connections that that's going to happen. But when you change the system, then you're going to be able to meet that cultural DNA that we all have. So with only a couple minutes over, these are our 2 best learners in our office environment. They're my loves, along with my grandchildren. They're my 2 therapy dogs that are in training right now. That's Buster and Charlie. They're little babies. But if you want to contact us and ask us any questions, I'd say Masi Cho, and Krista would say, yeah. Please do at any point. And I'll give a shameless plug, March 22nd and 23rd. Our Children, Our Language, Our Way is our education conference. It will be in Whitehorse on the traditional territories of the Kwamandun First Nation and to Anquichan First Council. Please come.
When? March?
March 22nd and 23rd, 2023.